The very moment you blame is the very same moment that your consciousness collapses. And while your story may be correct, blame still keeps you asleep. And as long as you continue to blame anyone or anything for your internal state of consciousness, for that long, you will be blocking yourself from the full awareness of love's presence. So if you're brand new here, then welcome. Welcome to Beyond the Matrix. Beyond the Matrix is the space where we wake up to the patterns. First, we wake up to the patterns that have been running our life, the patterns that have been thinking on our behalf, speaking on our behalf, making choices on our behalf. One of my mentors once said that until you awaken, in other words, until you have lucid awareness, you don't have free will. You have a program, an algorithm, a structure in consciousness controlling and directing your every move. And you call that free will, and you call that fate, and you call that your luck. But really, it is a full on expression of your consciousness. And every one of these structures, such as the structure of blame, can be chosen out of. And so today, we're going to take this journey. We're going to take it together and we're going to first examine what is this structure, this programming that causes us to attribute causality to something outside of ourselves for something that is emerging or expressing itself within. So, in a moment, I'm going to shift gears and take you on screen, and I'll take you through today's presentation, today's notes, today's lesson, with the intention to help you and I fully integrate this consciousness and be able to step out of the blame game and truly, truly reclaim our consciousness, reclaim our sovereignty. This is the big trick and trap with blame. It seems that you are being righteous. It seems that when you blame, you are correct. But at the very core of it, the moment that you blame is the very moment you give away your sovereignty and your power to the dream matrix. Okay, let's jump on. Okay, so let's dive right into the content then. Blame collapses consciousness. Here's what I mean. Blame means low consciousness, low on the Hawkins scale of consciousness. So, and it's low no matter how correct your story is. This is the core formula. Whenever we blame, we drop in levels of consciousness. Blame creates a victim frequency that limits personal power. It also limits you into a world in which there seem to be multiple powers competing for sovereignty, for freedom, for whose will be expressed. Of course, if this is what you're experiencing, that's the telltale sign that you are dreaming, right? Because in truth, there's only one presence and one power. There is not good and evil. This is uh, this is the hypnotism of the dream matrix. This is the entire thrust of what we may call separation consciousness. So blaming creates that victim frequency. You are becoming coherent with and entrained into the state of victim consciousness. To move beyond this downward force, we have to move from the idea that they out there is the problem or are the problem to I am congruent with this level of reality, and that is why I am experiencing it. Really, no different than you changing channels on a television or changing radio stations. You are tuning in and allowing your instrument to become congruent with a particular reality. Once you're congruent with this reality begins to express itself through you. Again, just like a radio station or a TV channel, as soon as you match it and become congruent, it starts to express itself into your reality. So, any place where you are blaming someone, let's say it's the elites or the politicians or the system, or you're bringing your parents into scrutiny and you say, oh, but it's because I grew up like this and my parents did this, or my environment was like this, or my partner's like this, my job, etc. And that's why I am the way that I am. As long as you're doing that, you are not sovereign, not free, not awake, despite any level of spiritual languaging or context. All it is that you are essentially perhaps taking on a spiritual identity in this dream matrix. But somebody who has a spiritual identity is not any different than somebody who has the identity of, let's say, an Adolf Hitler, or whoever is the current, megalomaniac, evil representation in your world. Personality structures are dream character personas. They are not the soul. They are characters that are playable in this game. And so, even if you have a high degree of spiritual awareness, but you are experiencing in your reality the belief in blame, and I really mean the belief in blame, because you can certainly have your mind spit out blame as a reaction. But if you believe that thought and you stand with it and you stand behind it and you're willing to put your faith in it, now you have given your power and your sovereignty away. You've given it away to the dream matrix, which means that you're still running victim consciousness, which is the foundational software of this realm. And even if your evidence is impressive and your story is correct and people agree with your story, nonetheless, as long as you see yourself as a victim to something outside of you, you are essentially entraining yourself deeper into the consciousness of victimhood and separation. Blaming others fosters a mindset of victimhood, where external circumstances dictate your reality. And this state of consciousness then traps you in a cycle of defensiveness and disempowerment, preventing growth and healing. Yes, preventing growth and healing while you are in that state. But because you're here watching this video, it means that you're not just in the state, you are becoming aware of the state. And now there are two. There's the state and your awareness of it. And this is the beginning of freedom and choice. Before then, when you fully identify with a state of victimhood or blame, it is as if you are one with it, and there's no way of freeing yourself from it. In this way, of course, it prevents your growth and healing. Recognizing this energy, though, allows you to break free from the blame game, reclaiming your true identity, your spiritual identity, your true self, and reclaiming sovereignty, and of course, opening to the path of radical responsibility and empowerment, which is the path of the Creator. So there's a second aspect to blame and victimhood, which is the idea of the fear of being controlled. So being anti-control and trying to prevent others from controlling you keeps you, ironically, controlled. The anti-control mindset, it may seem liberating. It may seem like you're this rebel and that you're, free and breaking free of the chains and bulldozering the system. But it often leads to even deeper entrapment. So when you're hyper anti-authority, anti-system, anti-elite, anti-evil, whatever it may be, right? Because in the scriptures, this was well known thousands of years ago, right? It's asking us to not resist evil. It's asking us to turn from it. To turn the other cheek doesn't mean let your cheek get smacked. You smacked on one side, now you turn the other cheek and they smack you again. No, that's not what it is. It is that you got smacked and now you see, I recognize what that is. I recognize that that is the programming of the dream matrix. Let me turn away from that. Let me actually shift entirely into a new orientation. But while you have this sense of trying to resist control, you are still orbiting around the very thing that you claim to be wanting to get rid of, which is the fear of being controlled, control itself. When you organize your life around being not controlled, well, what this means is that control is still the center point reference of your experience. And so it's inescapable. You start to see it everywhere. And the more you give attention to something, by the law of attention, that thing grows in your experience. So it's essential to recognize that if your nervous system is always scanning for, well, insert your fear of being controlled here, maybe it's to do with your partner or your boss or your government or your religion or whatever it is, your life is still being run by that fear, even if you're fighting it, even if you're condemning it. So the true freedom lies in transcending fear and reclaiming individual sovereignty by consciously stepping away. This is that turning the other cheek, right? We turn away from the dynamics of blame and resistance. And the third, and this is the final part, of what keeps the blame game alive and seemingly thriving in our consciousness. And that is the impact of dehumanization. This one is quite subtle. It's not as obvious as the first two. The first one is like, oh yeah, you're pointing the finger. Okay, got me, right? The second one was about um, not being controlled. And it's like, okay, yeah, that one feels quite obvious. But this one, who is dehumanizing who? Well, let's take a look. And in understanding the impact of dehumanization. So, what this really is talking about is that every time that you turn anybody, anyone, into a they, into the other, instead of a human being just like you, that very moment you are essentially labeling them. And in there, you lose the ability to learn from them. That means that you freeze your own evolution at that particular level, and you're blocking your inherent ability, in fact, maybe even your responsibility, if you are choosing into the spiritual path of awakening, of seeing the other, seemingly other, quote unquote, seeing the Christ in them, the light in them, the spark of the infinite creator in them. That soul, the innocence behind whatever costume, whatever character they're playing in this movie, that, right? We block that from our awareness. And the moment that we block that from our awareness, essentially, we can very easily say that we are in hell in that moment, right? Because what is hell except seeing something around you that is seemingly completely not like you, something that is also trying to control you, and something that is responsible for how you think and feel and how your inner world is being shaped. What could hell be except that realm of complete victimhood and helplessness? Yeah. So dehumanization leads to a spiritual blindness. And that spiritual blindness limits your access to love, to compassion. Whenever we reduce individuals to mere symbols or stereotypes, we lose who they truly are. When we label somebody, understanding stops, connection stops. When we now think, oh, that's who that is, and that's not like me. And so there is that separation, and the separation is emphasized. So this process not only harms the other, because of course, all thoughts are shared, right? And as thoughts seemingly leave your mind, so to speak, of course they're impacting the other person. We are sensitive to each other's thought forms and energy and emotion. So it is undeniable that the person that you're feeling about is also experiencing, so to speak, energy of poison, energy of distortion being projected towards them. That's at the level of separation, yeah? But this process, of course, not only harms them, but impoverishes our own growth, our own well being. So it's recognizing the humanity in each person. That is what allows us to embrace compassion, to foster a deeper spiritual vision that encourages us to learn and grow and evolve in our relationships rather than condemning each other. So, how do we shift? Let's dive into this. This is the core of the process: releasing blame and victim consciousness. The core of this understanding is that, of course, you can disagree with this harmonious behavior. You can say that's not what you want in that reality. You can totally have preferences. But while you have your preference, you don't have to lose sight of the divinity in the so called other, or in the circumstance, in whatever it is that you are perceiving. So, the recognition of this is centered around the awareness that, of course, no human being is only dark, no matter how evil or wrong they seem. And no human being is only light, no matter how holy or spiritual they seem. Everyone has a mix of fear, distortion, and of course, sincere intention. One important trap that we should point out here is that many of the New Age spiritual paths are driving this idea that there's a collective awakening, a collective transformation. And while that certainly feels like the unfolding direction of this movie, there is no collective consciousness that you need to fix. So that means any idea of you needing to fix, change, manipulate, or control anything or anyone out there, including a system, a government, a person, a group, that is not the core foundational move for your awakening and for your being and living in truth, in bliss, in consciousness, in that state of your needs being all needs met, right? There is no collective consciousness you need to fix. There's only your consciousness and the realities you agree to live in. If you want to tune into a world where the collective is chaotic and seems to be oppressing and dominating you and you have to fight it, you can. But you can also tune into a world where the collective is creating the perfect congruent conditions for your spiritual evolution. So here's the two premises. These are two of my favorite teachings, right? If we take a look at this dynamic from the ACIM, A Course in Miracles lens, then we can very clearly apply the principle of I am never upset for the reason I think, right? The reason I think is based on the past. My upset, in truth, is because I am not aware of source. I'm not aware of source love, source light, source life. And that's why I'm truly upset. But I think it's because you did something to me. No, if I was aware of me being plugged into source right now and the fullness of the love of God that is already and always here, blame would become impossible. It simply wouldn't make sense. We wouldn't have time for it. There would be no time to engage in blame. So the upset is, of course, then showing you your own perception, not their power, not them doing something to you. They have no power over you. But it's revealing that your perception is congruent with the idea that others have power over you. And that is your opportunity for transformation. Similarly, if we take the point of view of manifestation and Neville Goddard's work, we can position this idea as you keep living in the state of the oppressed. So if you find yourself being oppressed or victimized, well, this is the state. And how is that state being kept alive? Through identity. Remember, this is the whole core foundation of Neville's teaching. Whom do you say that I am? Right? Oh, I am somebody who is oppressed and victimized and wronged. Okay, well, as long as you keep identifying an oppressor out there and yourself as the oppressed, well, this is a closed loop. You are bound to experience what that radio station is playing. You are bound to experience what that TV station is going to be broadcasting. There is no way out unless you decide to shift your perception and identity. So, to conclude this aspect here, you cannot change the system or the person. You can only change your perception of them. In other words, you can only change what you are congruent with, right? In other words, what radio station are you tuning into? This you can change. But what's happening inside of that radio station, you have no control over whatsoever, right? In the very same way that you have no control over what happens on the radio station when you turn on your radio in your car, in that very same way, you cannot change the existent reality that is being played on this level of consciousness. You can only tune into a higher level of consciousness in which these particular dynamics simply don't exist. So the move towards true freedom is not in correcting the error out there, but it's in shifting your consciousness within. You can say, I don't agree with that behavior, but I won't collapse or abandon myself to it. And I can still see the soul, the innocence, and very often the wound underneath that behavior. You might have heard this saying, hurt people, right? The people, those who are hurting, those who are hurt, they are bound to inflict the same hurt on others. It is inevitable. Hurt people hurt people. So when this is why, again, the Course in Miracles is pointing out that if it's not love that you're seeing, guess what you're seeing? You're seeing a call for love. That's what that is. So that's the wound underneath calling for love. Please help me. But that please help me may look quite atrocious and quite even dangerous, so to speak, to your physical body or emotional body, but at the same time, innocent in its expression. Like, like when you see an animal, let's say a wolf caught in some kind of a trap and it's just snapped its leg, and it's like that wolf, no matter if you come and try and approach it to free it from its trap, is going to attack you and hurt you because it is hurting. Yeah. So it's very important that we remain aware that the source of the discord out there is not somebody's or some soul's evil desire. It is that soul's innocence and their orientation in their soul evolution that brings them to be right there where they are to receive that perfect lesson that they're there to receive, as are you. So this is spiritual awakening in practice. The awareness of your own integrity, your own, let's say, orientation of service to other, your sovereignty in saying, I won't collapse or abandon myself into the discordant energy or behavior. And lastly, the recognition of the Christ, of the light, of the truth beyond the appearance. So as you clean up who you blame, who you dehumanize, who you refuse to learn from, at that very moment, your world, which means your money, your relationships, your team or group dynamics, your health, all of this is being impacted by your state of consciousness, and all of this will quietly rearrange itself around this new expression of who and what you are. Okay, so if you want to ground this in a little bit, I want to offer you a quick journaling exercise. To be honest, I don't know how quick. I would really encourage that you sit down and really give yourself maybe even 20 minutes to reflect on this. Divide your page into 2 columns. Just draw a line down the middle. And on one side, put the heading story. And what we're going to explore here is whatever painful story in which you think others have wronged you. And maybe it's your partner's doing something or limiting you in a certain way. Maybe it's the economy. Whatever it is, write down the narrative that you have about this painful situation. That will be on one side. On the other side, I want you to write down the heading truth. And I want you to reflect on the shared soul experience behind the behavior. You can go back and look at the principles that we covered from Neville, from ACIM, just from this overall discussion and the awareness of what's truly happening on the other side. The idea here is that you begin to realize the shared aspect. The shared really means that both you and whatever's unfolding in the situation share a commonality. We want to find these commonalities because they're going to help to unclench this perspective in which you feel yourself wronged by another and really blaming them and seeing them as a they, right? When you do this, when you sort out this, so to speak, the inventory around the situation, you're going to notice that this practice encourages a shift from blame to actually empathy and compassion. It prevents the heart from hardening and growing heavy with resentment, with judgment, with fear, with anger. And instead, it's fostering understanding and connection. We start to see the commonality and we start to let the labels soften. And when we let the labels soften, then connection becomes possible. So, by focusing on the humanity or that shared soul experience of others, we can restore compassion and clarity as well in our relationships, allowing for those healthier dynamics, the ones that feel more like love, peace, joy, the ones that are more reflective of your soul's truth. And this lens, then, of course, helps to elevate consciousness. Your consciousness is raised. And whenever any one of us raise our consciousness, it lifts the entire field around us and reminds us that everyone's navigating their own challenges. We start to see life from a different point of view. So I want to encourage you to try this exercise once, and if it lands for you, then maybe start to bring this in as a regular practice. It will certainly lead to profound insights and growth because it will challenge the default narrative that has been keeping you trapped in these lower states of consciousness. All right. I trust you enjoyed and benefited from that journey into really seeing how blame collapses consciousness into really the lowest denominator in that situation and completely strips us of our power. What power? The power to shift our consciousness, our perception, the power to shift the narrative within, right? That inner dialogue, the story that we're telling ourselves about what's happening, that is actually then, of course, creating the feeling of what's happening. And as the feeling floods our body, our awareness, now it becomes reality, it becomes its own state, right? And that downward force that is keeping us suppressed from all the peace, love, joy, connection, oneness that we want to experience in our heart, that is the very truth of our being, that is essentially the path of blame. And so, in this conversation today, I hope you got to see how false this path is, no matter how true the story seems, how no matter what, the moment that we blame, we give away our power, our sovereignty, and everything that we've ever wanted. So next time, the moment that this energy comes up and you want to blame, take it as a signal, as like a check engine light, as an alert, and say, okay, pause everything. Don't speak, don't act, don't allow yourself to brood upon and think upon this state. Uh, the moment that we act from it, speak from it, think from it, that moment, it becomes our identity and we become entangled in that identity. Then it becomes very difficult to separate ourselves until this moment of awareness comes in. You become very present and you start to feel for that choice again. You start to say, oh, yeah, but there is a way that I can look at this that is going to free me from this idea that I'm projecting into reality that my power and my good is somewhere other than here, now, and within. Okay? I hope this conversation served you. I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. If it did, what aspect of what we talked about here really sticks with you? what can you actually apply to transform your perception in the way that we've been talking about? And if you want, maybe you share a situation in which you actually applied this knowledge, this way of relating to our inner world and had a result. And maybe you want to share that in the comments because that will inspire others to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to shift my consciousness as well. I'm going to make a difference here. I'm going to stop the blame game, stop the narrative. I'm going to start telling a new story, new alignment, new consciousness. So you have that power to inspire others. I want to encourage you to do that. And until I see you again, I wish you all the very, very best. Love fully, forgive quickly, and enjoy this beautiful life. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.
I'm already love, already joy, already peace, already whole. I see the infinite potential flowing through my soul. God is living my life, I'm just a witness to his plan. I surrender to the flow, I let go, I let it stand.